Finally, Instagram has shared the secret to cracking the Instagram algorithm. And I've got some other cool photo news on the other side of the intro. Stay tuned. Hey gang, I am Joe Edelman, and welcome to The Last Frame Live. Hey, if you're watching live, please leave me a little note in the chat. Let me know who you are and where you're watching from. Already, I got Lynn here from New York, and FN89 is here from, I believe, Canada. Pateo in Switzerland, Alvin in Virginia, Olas is here. Thank you, gang. And if you're watching the replay, no worries. Drop a comment below the video so that I know you're here. You're all part of a growing global community of photographers in over 100 countries who tune in to watch The Last Frame every week. And for that, I'm going to do my best and work really hard to help you with your photography in the next 60 minutes. And you know, it would help a lot more people find out about The Last Frame if you could do me a solid. Hit that thumbs up below the video, right, like down there, okay? The more thumbs up, the more YouTube will recommend the show to other photographers. And of course, while you're there, feel free to hit that share button. Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. You can hit that share button, or you can share the link, Last Frame Live. I just dropped it into the chat window for you. It's also in the show notes below. Twitter, Facebook, they're the fastest way to get the word out. So let's dig in. Tonight's topic, Instagram. You know, I find it interesting because for years, photographers have been whining, complaining about Instagram and the Instagram algorithm. Every time the algorithm changes, all the photography blogs post articles with big headlines, and a whole bunch of other people like, YouTubers, they create all kind of videos with clickbait headlines, and even others go ahead and they create entire coaching programs that you can spend a ton of money on to learn how to beat the algorithm. And by the way, please never spend money on programs like that. Seriously, because even if they do work, what you learn in that program will change like within 6 months, period. So the bottom line of this conversation, there are no shortcuts. If you want to build a social media following, whether it's for fun or for profit, you need to have great images, and you need to provide value to the people that you want to follow you, and you need to provide a great experience to the people that you hope to have follow you. If you don't, you won't grow your business, you won't grow your following or your business, period. So please, let's stop blaming Instagram. We don't pay for it. It's free. And oh, wait, before I actually get into the algorithm, I almost forgot. I just mentioned the word value. Tomorrow, so that's Thursday, June 10th, I will be presenting a free workshop sponsored by the folks at daisy.com. In fact, I'll switch my screen over here. The topic, adding value to your photography. You know, for most of us, photography begins as a solo pursuit that we do to our satisfaction, right? It's not business, it's fun. And from there, if you want to build a following or find clients who will pay for your work, you need to create and provide value with your work. So please, it's free. Join me tomorrow. Now, it's a little bit of an unusual time for me, but that's okay. Let's make it work. It's 1 p.m. Eastern time in the US, which means it's 6 p.m. British Standard Time in the UK. And I'm going to outline the importance of value, how to create it regardless of the genre that you pursue. You can go out and shoot insects or wildlife, and it still applies to you. So remember, it's a free class. I put the link in the registration, or the link for registration, in the chat. You do have to register. It's also in the show notes below. So I hope to see you there. So what did we learn this week about the Instagram algorithm? I'm going to switch over to this article here because I'm going to read you some parts of it. Just like in grade school, I'm actually going to read you some parts of it. So yesterday, June 8th, Instagram released this article on their blog. The article is titled, Shedding More Light on How Instagram Works. Now, look, if we're being honest, contrary to all the headlines, there are no big revelations in this article. But there actually is some great information in the form of some pretty simple, almost common sense explanations about how you can improve your Instagram experience. And that's why I wanted to review this tonight. Not, for all the clickbait, oh my God, you can beat Instagram now. You can't beat Instagram. So stop trying, because the worst part of it is, if you're serious about growing a following or using Instagram for marketing, beating it only leads to turning people off when it comes to your work, right? Because that means you're putting yourself in front of people that really aren't interested in seeing you. So there's no win in beating the algorithm. But I do want to share some key points from this article. And the link for the article, it's in the show notes below the video. So feel free to check it out if you want to read it for yourself. But there's a couple things just to give you the highlights that they share in here. So number one, there isn't an algorithm. There are multiple algorithms. They explain that in the first paragraph, right? So depending upon what part of the Instagram app you're interacting with, whether it's posts on the feed, whether it's reels, whether it's stories, they use different algorithms for different things. So you need to understand that it's not as simple as just saying this one thing fixes everything. But here's where the algorithms, they give you a little bit of the history of why the algorithms exist in the first place. Because for those of you that have been around for a while, that remember back when Instagram started, which was, end of 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. In fact, here they say 2010 when they launched. All right. Basically, your feed, it was just kind of in chronological order, which at first was kind of nice, right? The posts that were at the top were the newest things and you go back through it. But then as the platform grew, and then as we started to use it more for marketing and we started following more people, it would get to the point that there were, people who you liked seeing their photography and their posts, and you just never saw them because there was just so much, and their stuff was just getting pushed to the bottom. And it was becoming about, well, how often do you post? Because you had to keep posting to stay up at the top. So very wisely, they created an algorithm. And the algorithm basically, just like any other AI, artificial intelligence, it was designed and still is maintained to learn from you and your habits, what you like, what you comment on, what you spend more time watching, what hashtags, search terms you do, what videos or posts you will look at from the Explore page, etc. They're using that technology to basically personalize your experience, with the goal being, which I think is a great goal. The goal being so that everybody has a completely unique experience that fits their needs, their desires, their likes, etc. And I will tell you, only because I'm a nerd and I've been geeking out over TikTok while we were in lockdown for the pandemic, TikTok actually does an amazing job with the way their AI learns from you. It is incredibly intuitive. So what Facebook meaning Instagram, what they realized was by 2016, most people were missing like 70% of the posts that were coming up in their feed. The platform was growing too fast. There was just too much. And so you were missing posts from friends, family, relatives, the people that you really wanted to see posts from, you weren't seeing them. So that's where they started to change the feed. So you've got all these different algorithms, right? So then it comes and they tell you basically, so how do they rank your feed and your stories? So basically the feed and the stories, those are the places where, and they tell you in the very first sentence, people want to see content from their friends, family, and those who they're closest to. And remember, your customers are people. So if you're trying to build a following, so when I say customers, gang, even if you just want to have a following to be able to share your stuff with and maybe get some likes and some comments and feel good about what you're doing, and that's not a bad thing. Let's stop making that a bad thing. But even if that's what you want, those people are essentially your customers for this conversation, okay? So priority is going to go to friends, family, relatives, etc. But then they start looking to kind of rank things from there. And they're taking information about what was posted, the people who made the posts, your preferences, what they refer to as signals. Those signals, as I mentioned, the things that you click on, the things that you watch. McFly added, I overlooked it, how long you actually watch something, especially for videos, or you're watching just the first few seconds of it, or you're watching half of it, all of it, etc. They take all this stuff, and here's the order of importance that they look at things. One, the information about the post. In other words, the signals about how popular a post is, how many people have liked it, more mundane information about the content itself, like when it was posted, how long, et cetera, et cetera. Then information about the person that posted it. That helps get a sense of, listen closely here, how interesting the person might be to you. So they're looking at your profile, your images, the things that you say, the comments that you respond to. And when they're trying to decide who gets to see your work, they're looking at that information and trying to decide, okay, based on all of these things that this content provider does, who is likely to enjoy this and engage with it? And then also your activity, and then the history of you interacting with someone. So think about this. Even if we just stop right there and we don't go through the rest of this article, and it's a very short article, I really sincerely encourage you to read it if you are interested in, number one, growing your Instagram following, and number two, if you want to have a better Instagram experience in terms of what you see. They actually give you some great tips at the end of this article, okay? And they also dispel the myth of shadow banning. So let's just stop that conversation, right? So the point is, if you look at just these four things and the small descriptions that are with them, we can start to draw some really easy parallels. Think about real life. No virtual stuff, no social media, in person. Maybe for some of you, you need to kind of go back to school in terms of just remembering those kind of scenarios, right? But think about real life. The people that are the most interesting are the people that have interesting things to say, the people that tend to provide value, meaning they show empathy and they're helpful and they share. So gosh, sounds like that's exactly what the Instagram algorithm is trying to replicate. So there's no rocket science here. See what I'm saying? You can't game this, because even if you manage to game it temporarily, the people that you wind up in front of are people that actually, statistically, really, really good statistics. Think about how many millions and millions and millions of users and posts and information that they have able to build into their AI and their algorithms. The people that you're going to show up in front of don't actually care about your crap. So there's no benefit to gaming it. If you actually trust their algorithms, even as a business, even if you're trying to sell a product, trust their algorithms, but create posts that have value, posts that are engaging, posts that are interesting. More people will latch on to your posts and wind up following you and will see the work that you're doing. And honestly, gang, it doesn't get any simpler than this. You know, now I realize for a lot of you, that means, like, okay, a lot of work, right? And just the idea that it's called social media for some of you, look, I'm just keeping it real, but I realize that's like, I don't want to have to be social, especially not on the internet. Well, hey, I'm sorry, but then don't whine about it, right? You know, you can certainly go back to old school word of mouth. You might find the yellow pages in some places and you could put an ad there if you want to make money, but you're not going to build a following. This is how it's done in today's world. And the way that it's done is by being a decent human being and providing value to people, giving people a reason to care about you, not expecting that they should care. You don't deserve it. You have to earn it, right? So they go on. Let me scroll down here a little bit more. And I'm skipping over a bunch of stuff, but like I said, it's actually a really short article. So I encourage you, read through it, okay? The Explore page, which some people use the Explore page heavily, others don't. I myself hardly ever look at the Explore page, but a lot of people, you know, that's their kind of mindless, let's just go out and find interesting things. For me, I do that on TikTok. So I'm not saying it's wrong to do it on Instagram, but I'm just saying that's how some people do it. So they tell you how they go about doing that. how your information get in there. So here, when you get to these bullet points, again, these are the bits of information which are incredibly similar to the bits of information in the last section, how you see things. So how do things wind up in Explore? It's really the same kind of information. It's stuff that's interesting. It's stuff that connects with your likes and your dislikes. So the whole point is what they're doing is, as a user of Instagram, not as somebody that wants to get followers or wants to make money, but as a user, what they're doing is they're working very, very hard to make sure that the stuff that pops up in front of you is stuff that's going to interest you. At the end of the day, that's it. Now, look, do they benefit because they can charge more for ads, et cetera? Yes, but again, we don't pay for this. So that's not it's really not even an argument. It's not even a debate. Of course they make money. Of course they want you to spend time on the platform. Otherwise, why would they build it? Like, what would be the point, right? So again, what is going to get you noticed is actually providing some value. And I know a lot of you are like, man, all this value crap. What do you keep on with this value crap? Come to my workshop tomorrow. And by the way, I'm not talking about Instagram just so that I can pimp my workshop. It was a little bit of kismet that this article showed up. So there it is. I'm taking advantage of it, yes, and I'm pimping my workshop. But I promise you, it's a conversation that needs to be had. If you listened to my Talk Chat interview with Miguel Giles a couple weeks back, we briefly touched on this topic of value and experience. And Miguel had some really, really strong opinions, which I completely agree with in that conversation. This workshop that I'm doing tomorrow for Daisy, I'm going to take it even further. And I'm going to give you some actionable tips, which again, it's not all about making money. It's just about getting people to care about what you do. And then you can worry about making money. As we go through the rest of this article, they do the same thing, how they rank the reels if you're doing reels. For those of you that don't know, you've got your Instagram posts, okay, which of course you can post a still image or a video, and you can do a carousel, which is where you swipe and you see multiple images. Then you have the Instagram stories, which disappear in 24 hours. And then you have reels, which basically are Instagram's answer to TikTok. So the first question I get from a lot of people is, do I need to do all three? Like, oh my God, that's overwhelming. It's like, please understand, contrary to all the BS that you have read, seen in videos, all that crap, I promise you, you do not have to do it all. You can be very, very successful with your social media and not do it all. You don't have to post 5 times a week, 6 times a week, 7 times a day. There is no formulas for that. Because when you're doing that, all you're doing is you're pumping out 90% crap. I don't care who you are. If that's what you're doing, you're pumping out 90% crap. Post what has value. Post what you're proud of. And leave the rest out of it. Certainly, there is new data that's available. Data is very valuable. Reels on Instagram perform very, very well. Instagram wants to build Reels dramatically because they want to knock TikTok out of the box. Instagram was a little late to the game. TikTok got way ahead of them. So Instagram's playing catch up. So if you are producing Reels, you are going to get better traction right now. That will change. So that's not a forever statement, but you're going to get better traction than you will with a story right now. And there may well be some people that are posting that can contradict that with their analytics. But for the most part, everything I've been reading and what I'm seeing in my own analytics and my own experiences, that is the case. Okay. They go on in the article, they talk about shadow banning and the fact that they don't make it this big, kind of, I don't want to say dark arts. I guess that's where I was headed, but it's a thing, but it's not a thing. Meaning, if you get shadow banned, if your stuff's not being seen, I promise you it's your fault. Okay? They don't have it out for you. They're not trying to cut the legs out from under all of your efforts. They're just not. Now, just like when I got banned from Facebook, are the AIs or the bots that monitor all these posts, are they fallible? Absolutely. Yeah. You see here, Instagram's only 11 years old. It's still a baby by business standards. And this is a baby where they are relying on a tremendous amount of automated technology to do this work. I mean, just imagine how many people they would have to have sitting reading Instagram posts. Could you imagine if your job was to read Instagram posts for 8 hours a day? I know some of you are like, I do that already. If only I could get paid for that, right? But seriously, think about that. If that was your job, that's just, it's not practical. Okay. So they have bots that do it, and the bots have to learn. So just like my situation when I got dumped off of Facebook, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't break any rules, but I triggered a bot. And so it happened. These things will take place. But the shadow banning thing, no, they're not out. They're not out to get anybody. You're going to get banned and your stuff's going to get removed if you violate community standards. Period. That's it. Okay. And so, especially in the modeling realm, there are a lot of photographers and models who find it offensive that they're not allowed to show nudity because their nudity is a work of art. It's like, please grow up. Once again, it's not your website. You do not have a constitutional or God-given right to have an Instagram profile. You don't pay for it. So if you choose to use it, whether you read them or not, you agreed to the terms of service. So just deal with it. There are other platforms that will welcome those nude images. That's where they should be, period. Okay? And then they finish up, they give you the tips. How do you influence what you see? So this isn't about getting more followers. This is like, I am so sick and tired of my scroll feed just being filled with stuff. It's like, why is this here? Well, just like anything else, you got to do a little bit of work. Sorry, but that's how it works, right? So, you can go ahead and you can identify who are your close friends because they're always going to show up. You can go ahead and you can mark recommended posts as not interested because they will start to build categorical information around the ones. Like, honestly, I did that back during the election, which maybe a lot of you did, but if you didn't, it would have saved you a lot of grief. Almost any time a political ad of any type showed up, and believe me, I don't care what side of the fence it was on. So I was an equal opportunity offender. I just didn't want politics to be dealing in my Instagram or my Facebook. I did it in both of them. I would report that I am not interested in seeing this. And you know what? They went away. That's the best part of it. It works. But just like anything else, you have to put a little bit more effort into it. So they're basically giving you all the information. And the other reason why I wanted to show you this blog article, because in and of itself, it's not revolutionary, even though I think pretty much all the photography blogs did, these big headlines like, oh, here's the algorithm. No, that's not the algorithm. This is just common sense, how to show good etiquette on social media, and the fact that good etiquette will pay you back in returns. That's all it is. But I wanted to let you know there's a lot of great information on their blog, and they update with really good articles along the way that, give you tips. So for a lot of you that are trying to get your heads wrapped around social media and how to make it work for you. So I don't mean just looking at things, but I mean actually marketing yourself, whether it's marketing for the sake of building a following, whether it's marketing to try and make money. There's actually great information on here. And look, this is a publicly traded company, so I'm using the word transparency cautiously. But compared to many companies, Instagram is actually pretty transparent about the way the whole setup works. Okay. Obviously, they're not giving you actual algorithms. That would be like probably millions and millions of lines of code. You can't distill millions and millions of lines of code down to like 4 or 5 bullet points, folks. It doesn't work that way. Right. So I encourage you, check it out. Good information to be found there. But that is really all there is to the algorithm. Just create posts that you think people would actually sincerely care about. Consider, I had this really cool picture and I love this picture, but how can I provide value to someone? And I'm not going to say that my Instagram profile is the greatest ever, but I want to prove a couple things to you with my Instagram profile. Number one, 99% of my Instagram posts are carousels. You swipe and there is information behind them. How the shots were made, sometimes behind the scenes video clips, sometimes behind the scenes images. Frequently there are lighting diagrams, gear lists, etc. I answer 99% of the comments that are left on my Instagram profile. So if you ever want to talk to me, you ever have a question for me, I answer. right? I'm not necessarily going to answer 5 seconds after you leave the post. Sometimes I do, and people are quite surprised, but it may take a day, it may take a couple days, but I make it a point to answer. So social media is about being social. It's not just about sell, right? So take that information, add it to the presentation I'm going to do tomorrow. And if you're struggling with social media in particular and really getting any traction, I promise you, I can help you out. And it won't cost you a dime. And it's all very actionable and very doable. It's not super hard. Okay? So, changing gears. But before I do, let me just make a note here. I'm going to do something tonight that I haven't done in a long time, and that's a Q&A. So I'm just giving you a little bit of warning. I have a couple questions that came in advance, so I'm prepared. But for those of you that are here, come on, it's been a while, so type some questions in here. How can I help you, right? So we'll get back to that in just a minute. In other news for this week, OMD Solutions, that is the new company that is owned by JAP in Japan that spun off from Olympus. They just announced the brand new M.Zuiko Digital ED 18 to 25 millimeter f4 Pro lens, this is like an awesome range. So that is in 35 millimeters, that's a 16 to 50 millimeter equivalent. So it's like a super wide to all the way to a normal lens, which is awesome, okay? This lens comes in at 15 ounces. It has a close focus distance of 9 inches across the entire zoom range. So that's not just like, well, at wide angle, you can get the 9 inches. No, even at 25 millimeter, okay, you can get down to 9 inches. And it supports focus stacking on most of the Olympus camera bodies. The lens also is one of the Pro feature lenses, so it is IPX1 equivalent splash proof and dust proof, and freeze proof, I think, down to 14 degrees, if I'm not mistaken, which I will never have an opportunity to test that. I like being warm. But obviously what that's giving you is, ultimate reliability, weatherproofing, which is part of that M.Zuiko Pro series. Pair that lens up with one of the EM1 or EM5 series cameras, and you can use it in just about any environment, rain, snow, you name it. Front element has fluorine coating, makes it really easy to clean rainy, snowy, or dusty environments. I have a link down in the show notes. You can pre-order the lens now. It's got a street price of $1,099.99, and it will ship in July. You know that I'm sponsored by Olympus. I am an Olympus visionary. I was not paid to talk about this tonight. I have not had the opportunity to try one of these lenses yet, unfortunately. They, view this lens as a wildlife and an outdoorsy lens. And since I'm not wildlife and outdoors, I didn't get a sample copy. But I will tell you the range of optics that M.Zuiko and the Olympus brand produces, it's unrivaled in the industry. I mean, basically, they cover pretty much any shooting style and shooting condition that you can imagine, which is really impressive. And as always, of course, they're tack sharp. I know quite a few of you have messaged me recently and asked about the 100 to 400, the compact super zoom that they have. So 100 to 400, that's a 200 to 800 millimeter full frame equivalent. In fact, here, I'll go back and I can show you what that lens, whoops, maybe I can't show you what that lens looks like. I'm sorry, I had the wrong page queued up, but I can get it. Here it is. All right, that's what we want. So let me switch back to that. So this is the 100 and 400, which, it's kind of tiny there. Let me see if there's a bigger image of it. There you go. So that's a 100 to 400 millimeter lens. So remember, 200 to 800 millimeter full frame equivalent. And I'll show you, just to give you a sense of how tack sharp this lens is. Bear with me 1 second here. I'm going to switch over. These are some images. You saw a few of these a couple weeks ago, right? These are some images that I shot with that 100 to 400 millimeter lens. So these are my grandson playing Little League baseball. You'll see some of these images are on very sunny days with, part of the subject in sun, part of the subject in shade. And by the way, notice this is backlit, okay? Here, everything in shade on a cloudy day. The way that I shoot these sports is I select my shutter speed, My aperture, I leave it at wide open. It is a variable focus. It goes from, variable aperture lens. So depending on your focal length, it's going to range from 5.0 to 6.3, but I always set it wide open. I'll set my shutter speed, usually anywhere from at least 1,000 on up to potentially 2,000, depending on what angles I'm shooting at. And then I use auto ISO and exposure compensation to control my exposure so that I have perfect exposures every time. But all of these shots that you're seeing here are done with that 100 to 400 millimeter lens. So shots like this, I shoot them from the outfield. Now, this is a little kid's field, right? So it's not a full-size Major League Baseball field. But, I shoot them from the outfield looking in. And again, it's absolutely awesome lens, just incredibly sharp. This is not the 100 to 400. This is with a 12 to 45 from behind home plate. This is back to the 100 to 400. So just to give you a sense of what that lens can do, I've actually been having a blast with it. I'm so thrilled that I purchased that lens. It was not given to me, and I've just been having an incredibly good time with it. And especially shooting the little kids, it's great because you can literally take these little 7-year-olds and make them look like pro baseball players with it, which is a lot of fun. Okay. All right. So next up, before we get into Q&A real quick, a reminder, please check out the Talk Chat Photography Podcast. If you're not listening to these podcasts, gang, I promise you sincerely, you're missing out on some really, really great information. In the last episode, I interviewed the creators behind Imagine AI, which is an amazing AI editing software. In the episode before that, I spoke with the one and only Jack Hollingsworth. This guy is awesome. He's a very well-known professional photographer who shoots exclusively with iPhones. Seriously, no game. It's not a gimmick. He really does. You can find the links to those episodes in the show notes below. In this week's episode, I will be speaking with Mr. Phil Kaplan. Phil is from KEH Cameras, and the conversation that we're going to have is all about used gear. And I just want to get the link here for Talk Chat. I'll drop that in the chat window for those of you that are here live. And I got to tell you, this conversation definitely gave me a completely new outlook on buying and selling used gear. So I would encourage you, give it a listen. That episode is going to drop on Friday. So you can check it out at talkchat.com, which is the link that I just put in the chat. And of course, it's in the show notes below. So that's it for the news this week, gang. It's been a minute, pretty long minute, since we did just a simple Q&A and caught up. So let's chat. So there's a couple things. One, if you got some questions, I want to answer your questions. I want to help you. What are you struggling with? How can I help you with your photography? But also, what have you been shooting? I know the pandemic's not over and lockdowns are still in place in some parts of the world. But fortunately, at least here in the US, things are starting to open up. I heard from some friends in the UK, things are starting to relax a little bit. Things aren't completely open, but everybody seems to be headed in the right direction. So, we've all been in this lockdown for a year and some. What have you shot? What have you been doing? Or what are you excited about doing right now? And if you have any questions, do you know exactly what you're about to get into? So let's talk. So there's a couple questions here. Let me just back up here. Cloud Strife, it would be interesting to get something like this, but for Twitter. Are you talking about the information that I just provided? Whoops, that's the wrong button. Sorry, guys. The information I just provided for Instagram, I could definitely do that. I can tell you honestly, without even looking, it's going to be very similar. But I would be totally open to coming back next week and giving you a little bit of feedback on what it will take. I can tell you right off the top of my head, hashtags. I didn't mention hashtags in the Instagram conversation because in that particular article, Instagram wasn't focusing on hashtags. But for both Twitter and for Instagram, hashtags are very important. Now, obviously, Twitter has not given us near as much insight into their algorithms, but I can tell you just in understanding how people tend to use Twitter, hashtags do come into play quite a bit more than they do, on any of the other platforms, really. So let me know if that's what you're referring to, and if it is, I'll gladly share some information. about that. Okay. So let's see. F&89, I was going to get the 7-14, but I think the 8-25 will be a better value. I plan to get into landscape photography as I'm still learning about landscape. Is 2.8 used often? You know, F&89, it's a great question. And I'll be completely transparent. So remember, I'm an Olympus ambassador. Okay. As I left Nikon, made the switch to Micro Four Thirds, I had an ingrained attitude in my head. If it's not 2.8 or faster, you know, f2, 1.8, etc., I won't consider it. At that point, I was of the mentality, no way am I going to touch like an f4 lens. So when I made the switch and, you know, picked up my gear, the lens that I didn't buy at the time was the 12-100 that Olympus puts out, which is an f4. And as soon as I made the switch and started talking about my gear and talking about the switch, I got bombarded from Olympus users. Like, oh my God, why didn't you get the 12-100? Like, you blew it. You totally blew it, Joe. You should have got the 12-100. And so I'm like, well, everybody is like, oh my God, this lens is so amazing. But I'm like, it's f4. So eventually, when I became an ambassador, you know, I got a discount. So I bought it. And it's one of my most heavily used lenses. So the funny part of it is here's what I've learned. That number one, if you have a good, solid understanding of depth of field. So for those times where you want a blurry background, because please note, you just saw those Little League pictures of my grandson with blurry backgrounds, and some of them even had bokeh balls in the background. That was with a lens whose maximum aperture was 5.0. And depending on the focal length, the maximum aperture was 6.3. And I still had nice, soft backgrounds, right? So as long as you understand depth of field and how to achieve depth of field, by having an f4 lens, all you're doing is you're taking away one piece of the equation in terms of how much softness can you get in the background. You still have other elements that contribute to that shallow background that you can use. So for the times you need it, if your budget won't allow you to maybe have, you know, the f4 that covers your broad range and then maybe have maybe like a faster prime for maybe like portraits where specifically you might want to have it. If your budget won't allow for that, then absolutely go with the f4 and just understand, stop watching YouTube videos and actually learn what depth of field is all about and how it really works. Because you can learn, well, you can let yourself think you're learning all about depth of field and watch 50 YouTube videos on depth of field. But the simple fact of the matter is you don't know a damn thing about depth of field until you take that information from those YouTube videos and go pick up your camera and actually apply it methodically. And then look at your results and work through and solve the problems. Because, you know, all these people with their Sonys and, you know, all the crazy bokeh and all this kind of stuff, I can do that with a Micro Four Thirds camera. Photography is about solving problems. So anyway, that was a long answer to tell you, is the 2.8 f4 thing an issue? For landscape stuff, especially not. No, because even if you're working in a low light scenario for a landscape, these are not moving, you know, moving object or moving subjects that you're shooting. Put the camera on a tripod if you need to, and just go with a slightly longer exposure. And, you know, you're talking from 2.8 to f4, you're talking a one-stop difference. That's all it is, one stop. So given, you know, even if you are in a situation where you can't use a tripod, keep in mind the amount of image stabilization that most of the Olympus camera bodies have. So when you're talking somewhere between 5 and 7 stops of image stabilization, depending on the camera and lens combination, what's the worry about that one stop that you're losing on the lens? So yeah, I am a 100% convert of the mentality that, yeah, you know what, if I'm going to carry a camera around for a long period of time, and I want the camera to be with me, but I don't want to have to deal with a lot of weight and gear and all that kind of stuff, I am going to go with the f4 lens because it's going to be smaller, lighter. And for that smaller and lighter lens, it's most likely going to cover a longer range like this, you know, the new lens that's coming out. So yeah, I would say that if you're on a budget F&89, The 8 to 25 is certainly providing you with more of a range. And I will tell you this. So I own the Olympus 8mm fisheye, it's a full frame fisheye, and I own the 7 to 14 wide angle. And the difference between the 8mm and the 7mm, it's really, really very minimal. So for that 1 millimeters, difference that you're losing, it's not going to be a big deal. And as much as I push back on the photo blogs a lot, I'll own that, okay? Because I think people get a little too caught up in a hype sometimes. But one of the things that's actually been really nice to see lately is the photo blogs have been publishing a lot of articles from YouTubers, from photographers who shoot landscapes, about the fact that you don't always have to use wide angle lenses. And in fact, sometimes the best way to shoot a landscape is not with a wide angle lens, but actually to shoot it with a telephoto lens and stitch images, or for that matter, even just shoot a more, compressed, narrow version of a landscape. Every landscape image doesn't have to be like the wide vista, right? So this whole idea of, landscapes, I need really wide, it's kind of an overdone philosophy. It's I hate to say lazy, but it is to a degree. It's lazy to call that like the best lens for landscape work, because there's just like anything else, just like with a portrait, you can't say that an 85, or in my case, a 45 is the best lens for portraits. It's a great lens for portraits, amazing lens for portraits, but the best? No, it depends on what I'm trying to accomplish. Sometimes the best lens for me for a portrait is a 75mm. Sometimes the best lens for me is a 14mm, right? So it really depends on what you're trying to do with the shot. Okay. All right. So let me scroll on back here. FN89, I saw that you also asked, and I'm going to be straight up honest. Any tips for shooting the eclipse tomorrow morning? Not for me. I'm not going to lie. So if I'm not mistaken, tomorrow is a solar eclipse, right? So that being said, be careful. That's the big thing I'm going to tell you. But bear with me 1 second here. If I'm not mistaken, I can give you some really great resources really quick here. Yeah. So I will drop a link here in the chat. This is from the Olympus website in the Learning Center for Olympus. There are a couple of really good articles that are broken down. In particular, Alex McClure, who used to be an Olympus visionary. This guy is like hardcore into astrophotography, that kind of stuff. It's got some great articles in there. And if you look closely at the articles, you realize they're not like kind of exclusive to Olympus cameras. Obviously, he's going to mention which Olympus gear he uses, but the techniques in that are things that you can do with pretty much all cameras. So I would encourage you check that out, because there's some really good resources there. But myself, I haven't shot an eclipse since I was a kid, and truthfully, if I remember, my results weren't that good, because at the time I would have only had like a 200mm lens. So yeah, I don't want to just spout off some things that I've read on the internet, because that's not really gonna help you. Cloud Strife, doesn't Facebook have some kind of shadow ban? No, the whole shadow ban thing, I hate to say it. So Cloud Strife, I'm not trying to insult you. This whole shadow ban thing, for the most part, it's people that buy into conspiracy theory stuff, right? It's and I can't say this as a fact. So folks, this is my opinion, but I will tell you this piece is fact. Every person that I have ever had a conversation with, and I have purposely had a few with people who have been mouthing off like, oh my God, I was shadow banned on, Instagram or Facebook, and this happened and that happened, and they're out to get me, and they won't do this because I won't buy ads and all this crap. I have a conversation with them, and I start asking them questions about how they use the platform, about what they post. And sadly, it becomes a lot like American politics, right? Like they've got this whole narrative in their head. I'm sorry, but it's just simply not real. There are no facts to support it. They read somebody proposing that this is what happens, and now it's fact in their mind, and so they're convinced. But realistically, when you look at what they post and how they post, etc., the reason they're not getting any traction is because the stuff they're posting is stuff that nobody cares about. And by the way, folks, I want to be really clear when I make a statement like that, I'm not insulting anyone. When I say like nobody cares about it, You have to understand that just because you, me, as a creative, creates something, that doesn't mean that everybody has to appreciate it or approve of it. It just doesn't. Okay? So it means that you've got to earn that. It's no different than, meeting people in person and talking to people. You have to earn those followings, right? So let's see here. I just saw a comment come in. The lone silencer. Sorry, you're wrong about that. I have seen proof of shadow. Lone silencer, you really pretty much just proved my point. Okay. So I don't even know who the hell you are, man. And I'm supposed to just take you at your word. You've seen proof. Man, where's the proof? What Facebook whistleblowers are we supposed to believe? Okay? And who got shadow banned and what did they get shadow banned for? Come on, man. All right? This is exactly the kind of BS. Show us some proof. It's like you guys have, and clearly, Lone Silencer, I'd love to know what you do for a living. And I'm not asking to make fun of you, but here's the thing. Like, people that have worked in the corporate world completely understand that a company of that size is not doing what they're being accused of. Look, and I'm not defending Facebook. Let's be clear, folks. Facebook needs to get their butts in gear. They have a lot of work to do because they have been very good at what they've done so far, meaning they have built a global platform that is beyond Mark Zuckerberg's college dreams, right? Good for them. But with that comes an incredible amount of responsibility. I do believe they are working very hard to catch up. Now, along the way, have they made decisions that have benefited their pocketbook? Of course they have. And I'm not saying that's okay, but I'm just saying that's to be expected. It's growing pains, right? So the system's got to get worked out. And I talked about this in my Facebook ban video, is there likely to be some, type of monitoring or, some type of rules that are put in place for social media and that? Possibly. Obviously, when that happens, we have to be very, very careful because it would be very easy to infringe on the First Amendment. But, all this, some whistleblower said this. It's funny, these whistleblowers, where has been the recourse from these whistleblowers? These are people that have said, I haven't seen these whistleblowers go up in front of Congress. I haven't seen any information presented that's in mainstream media. So I would love to be wrong, but if you're gonna say I'm wrong, let's show some proof, some legitimate proof. Not I heard it from somebody, okay? Because everything I shared with you tonight, I shared from my experience and I showed you URLs. That's the way we have this conversation, and that's the way we keep the conversation productive. I'd love to be wrong if there's better information, because then I get to learn something. But yeah, I've heard this, I've seen this from some guy who doesn't even use his real name. Sorry, that's not going to fly with me. Okay. All right. So scrolling on up here, Duty Licks coming from medium format, having more depth of field and at the same time letting more light in is one of the best things with Micro Four Third. Oh yeah, I mean that's a big change, right? And let's face it, every format at the end of the day certainly has kind of benefits, has drawbacks depending on what you're. There's no one size fits all, right? There's no one camera, there's no one format, there's no one lens. So yeah, I mean, when we're talking about depth of field and things like that, certainly, a Micro Four Third camera is definitely going to have a huge advantage over a medium format. So, okay. So let's see here, scrolling on up from Joe's Photography. In the photographing kids in the last frame, you said because you didn't get to all the thought of it, you plan to come back. Oh, and new last frame, will I do it again? Yes, I will come back to it. Just since I took last week off, Joe, I didn't want to come back and kind of continue with that. I will tell you completely honestly, photographing kids is not a topic that lots of people rush to YouTube for. So doesn't mean I'm not going to, finish the discussion, but yes, I will finish the discussion. It's just that I wanted to come back and after taking a week off, just get people engaged again. I have over the last, this is episode number 12. So 3.5 months, been experimenting with these last frame videos. Ultimately, gang, where I think it's going to wind up going is a little bit of a hybrid. Maybe it's an every other week thing where I'll do a lesson and then I'll do a last frame like this where it's a little bit of news and conversation. Maybe it'll be shorter lessons, a little bit of news, a little bit of conversation. Look, at the end of the day, I'm trying to find what I can do that will, one, fit within my schedule so that I can continue to produce other content and teach, because that's how I pay my bills. And two, that people actually find value in. And I'll be really honest with you guys. I am not even remotely incentivized or interested in doing tutorials right now. And I'll tell you why. Some of you won't like it, but I'm going to be honest. You can take it from there, right? When I became an Olympus visionary, I kind of had to slow down on the tutorials, because what a lot of people don't realize is putting out a video a week that's a tutorial where you're doing a photo shoot and videotaping that shoot and then writing a script and recording and editing and all that, it's a boat ton of work. That's like a full-time job, just doing a video a week. When I became a visionary, which was a great opportunity and financially beneficial to me, and I started traveling, that became a real challenge. What I also learned when I stopped doing the videos, number one, I learned a couple of things. Number one, YouTube is an old phrase. People watch as long as the monkey's dancing, and that's kind of like what YouTube is, right? But that was the big disappointment that I had. It's not that people stopped watching. It's just that when I asked people why, what I started to realize that people were watching my videos like it was some type of weekly serial television show. They weren't watching my videos and then going out and practicing what I taught. They were just watching my videos like, well, what kind of crazy idea will he come up with next? Cool. It's entertainment. Why do you think that all these other YouTubers, instead of doing a 6 or a 10-minute video where they're actually teaching you a lesson, breaking it down and showing you step by step, why do you think that instead of doing that, they have all kind of cool music and gimbal shots and, neat camera angles, and then basically they take the same pictures over and over and over again? Why do you think that is? Because they get more views that way, right? I never got into YouTube for the views. I got into YouTube to build an audience, which I've done. I got into YouTube to be able to teach. So I want to be able to do these weekly shows to stay connected with you folks, because you folks especially have been, the real supporters of what I do here on YouTube. But I'm looking to find the way that I can keep people the most engaged and have people get the most benefit out of it. So I'm going to continue to experiment a little bit. It's all good. I mean, I'm not asking for any sympathy, nothing like that. It's part of the learning curve. And I'm a little bit of a nerd. I enjoy that learning curve, kind of figuring out the psychology. But that was a long answer, Joe. I'm sorry. But yes, we will talk more about the kid stuff for sure. So Terry J Studios would love to hear. And by the way, thank you. You're very welcome. Would love to hear your thoughts about product photography, specifically beauty products. Terry, give me a little bit more specifics. Product photography, especially when we talk about beauty products, can be very challenging, but it can also be a lot of fun. So it really kind of depends a lot on your mindset. I would encourage you, and I don't know if he's here tonight. I haven't seen him check in. There is a gentleman that follows me, and he is a member of my Facebook group, which the link to my Facebook group, it's in the show notes below the video. His name is Patrick. He's from Paris, France, and he is building a career doing high-end product work, mostly beauty products. And I got to tell you, honestly, the work that he is doing, it's just brilliant. It's absolutely gorgeous. And he does share it in the group, and and we wind up talking about the images and that. So that would definitely be an opportunity for you to maybe pick up some things along the way. But do understand that one of the biggest things, and I'm not saying this to discourage you, but I would say this as a warning: if you're passionate about this idea, because honestly, if you're not passionate, maybe dabble and try it, but don't make a big move, because no photography is fun if you're not passionate about it. It's just not. But if you're going to get into the product work, and especially beauty products, attention to detail better be off the charts, period. Like, you walk into a department store and you go past the makeup counter and there's all those cool ads that, it might be a picture of a model. It might be a picture of just, a tube of lipstick or a bottle of cologne or something like that. Take a close look at those pictures. The lines are straight. You never see dust spots. Nothing's out of place. Everything is perfect, right? Totally perfect. So that in and of itself is a skill that nobody has. You have to develop that skill. And there's a whole bunch of human reasons why nobody has that skill. Some people are a little better at it than others to begin with, attention to detail, but it's a skill that you have to build. So the sooner you start that, the sooner you will be able to get to the point where your work is top notch, because part of that attention to detail means that you're going to create a lot of lighting problems for yourself. And so you have to solve those problems. So for some people, that's really fun. And that's a fun challenge, and they can kind of nerd out with that. For other people, not so much. You folks have heard me talk in the past that my son and daughter-in-law, they have a home decor business where they make at home candles, soy candles that are in glass jars and now white wine glasses that they're putting them in. And then they also do these concrete series and that. I've done their photography, their product photography for them in the past, and we're just getting ready to reshoot their entire product line because they've made some changes in the pieces and how they look. So as soon as I do that, which is probably going to be a couple more weeks down the road, I am going to document a lot of that so that I can share it with you folks, because obviously I am not a professional product photographer. I have done commercial advertising and product work in the past, and I paid my bills doing it for a couple of years. And I shared a few of those images along the way, but it's a whole different ballgame than shooting people and models. It's a whole different thought process. So if it's something that fits your mindset and you enjoy it, yeah, but attention to detail, that would be the first thing I would throw up to anybody to say, if you don't get your head wrapped around the importance of that, you will struggle doing, that kind of work. So, Richard, what are your thoughts on the Sigma 30mm f1.4 compared to the Ollie 45mm f1.8? Honestly, Richard, I'm sorry, I have no thoughts. I'm not a gear junkie. So I have used the Olympus 45mm f1.8, great lens, but of course I have the 1.2 and I love that lens. It's just, there are so many things that are great about the 1.2. I actually like its size. It's a little bigger than the 45-1.8, and I like that. I love the metal housing of the Pro lenses that Olympus uses. I love the fact that it is waterproof, okay? That's my lens. So I don't own the 1.8. I have used the 1.8, and it's great. Tack sharp, super nice lens. If somebody doesn't have need for the waterproofing and all those things, then there's certainly no reason to spend the money for the 1.2 Pro. But I've never used the Sigma, so I couldn't tell you. If it were me, I mean, since you're asking me about gear, if you own Olympus cameras and you're an Olympus user, buy the damn Olympus lens. Olympus lenses aren't that expensive. So you buy the Olympus lens, you're getting a lens that's engineered by the same engineers that designed the cameras and the rest of the lenses to work with your camera. To me, that's a no-brainer. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful towards Sigma or Tamron or Tokino or any of them. They've come a long way. I mean, unfortunately, I'm old enough. I remember when all three of those companies sucked miserably back in the day. But lens design and technology has come a long way. And those companies now, they actually make lenses for some of the camera manufacturers. So, it's not a quality issue in that sense. It's just the simple logic of, the differences that you're talking about, the 30-1.4 and a 45-1.8, to me, right about, those are two completely different lenses. 60mm focal length, if we're talking full frame, compared to 90mm, that's two very different lenses. There's no comparison there. So it really kind of comes back to, what are you going to use the lens for? If you're using it for portraits, don't go with a 60, go with a 90, right? If you're using it for something else, well then, maybe there's some potential there. But okay, I got one more here from Jeffrey, and I want to make sure I get this. It's going to take me over a minute or two. Shocker, right? How do I get a studio photography community going for my area? I wanted to get into sharing the cost of the studio, rental, model, and makeup artist with a group. Any advice? Sure, Jeffrey, be social. Do you have friends that are photographers? If you don't have friends that are photographers, make some friends that are photographers. Like, I'm seriously, I'm not trying to be quippy or short or funny about it, but maybe what you do is you start a Facebook group that's, studio photography in your town's name or portrait photography in your town's name, and just start collecting some people, getting to know people. See if your area has a camera club and join the camera club. Camera clubs are freaking awesome, people. Join the camera club and get to know people in the area that have similar interests. Okay. I will tell you this, Jeff, the biggest reason that most co-ops fail. So basically what you're describing is a co-op. You could call it a community, any of those, call it a rental studio, however you'd like. The biggest reason that most of them fail is that the person who is kind of making the whole thing happen wants to have a studio, but doesn't want to pay for a studio, which right then and there is problematic, right? Because what are you shooting that requires a studio, but you can't generate enough money to pay for the studio? That's a question you need to ask yourself. And it's not about like going into it full time even. You might have a great day job. Keep the day job. But if you want a studio, why not do work that's going to pay for that studio? And then it's all yours, right? So the thing you have to be careful of, if you're going to bring other people in, understand that you've got to make sure that you're not like pulling rank, that you're not getting a better deal than they are, all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, people are quickly going to say, you know what, the heck with this. Like, it's not worth the money that I'm putting in because I'm basically paying to keep up his studio and I don't have legit rights in use and all of that kind of stuff. So I have seen co-ops work very, very, very well. And I have seen them work miserably and fail literally within a couple of months. So just make sure you do a little bit of soul searching, be honest, but find where the photographers are in your area. There are photographers. Find the people that want to shoot portraits that either know how or want to learn how, and start making friends, right? But to think that you're just going to put out, the fact that you're asking me the question the way you did, the idea that you could just maybe like put up a post on Facebook, say, hey, I'm looking for people to share a studio. Good luck. That's not going to happen. I could do that, and I'm not going to get people to sign up for that, right? That's not the way to do it. Because I would assume that in that studio, you're going to have gear that you're going to leave there. You're going to have lighting stuff. You're going to have backgrounds. You also want to trust these people. When you're doing a co-op, there's a little bit of kind of a relationship scenario that's got to happen there. Unless you've got a lot of money behind you and, maybe you can pay to have somebody there to monitor it if you're not going to be there. Otherwise, are you going to be there when these people are there? How well do you know them? There's a lot of elements to it. So it's not that it's a bad idea. It's just be honest with yourself about what it is you're really doing and what you're trying to accomplish. That would be my recommendation. Okay. All right, gang. Let's see. Oh, there's another question here. I'm sorry. I missed that down at the bottom. Shocker. I didn't get any more information back from the Lone Silencer. Okay. From Ligzo Legacy. Gosh, I probably said that wrong. I'm so sorry if I did. How good are halogen bulbs as studio lights? Just starting out and considering buying them. To be honest with you, I wouldn't. If you're photographing people, I wouldn't. Two reasons. One, they get very warm and very hot, and they can explode. So if you do get a halogen bulb, make sure you get one that's got a good cage over it, because halogen tubes will explode. And the easiest way to make a halogen tube explode, by the way, is when you change the bulb, if you touch it with your finger. Even like right now, my fingers are nice and dry, they're fine, but if I touch the bulb, I'm going to leave grease on that bulb, finger grease. When the bulb heats up, that finger grease can cause the bulb to explode. So anytime you change the bulbs, do it with a rag, right? So that's problem number one. The bulbs can explode, so there's a liability element. And then number two, they get super hot and they're super bright, super bright. And most halogen bulbs, I don't know if any halogen bulbs can actually kind of be dimmed. Maybe they can, but most don't. Especially not if you're thinking of the idea of doing like shop lights because they're cheap, that kind of a thing. So if you're going to use halogen bulbs, number one, you're going to need a little bit more space because you don't want to have those bulbs really close to your subject, because your subject's actually going to feel like they're getting a suntan, and it's just going to be too bright, squinting, right? So you need to back them up, and then you need modifiers. And the problem is you can't put those halogen bulbs in like a regular softbox, because regular softboxes aren't rated to handle that kind of heat. So, if it's a scenario where you're trying to save money, I completely understand it. Been there, done that. And it's unfortunate, it's just a little bit of a nightmare. So I would encourage you actually just maybe be a little bit more patient and keep saving your pennies and look at some used gear. Make sure you check out the Talk Shop Photography podcast. It's going to drop this Friday. It's all about used gear, how to buy it, what to look for, all kind of stuff. For me, and I bought used gear in the past and I sold used gear. It was actually a really, really, really great eye opener. I learned a lot of really good stuff. So I would encourage you to check that out. Okay. All right, gang. See, this is a funny part of this. I actually enjoy doing these Q&As. I really do. So thank you guys for hanging out for an hour. I hope that you found some value in it. Make sure you do check out that Instagram article. I encourage you. It'll take you 10 minutes tops. Read the article. You will learn things in there. And hopefully, I will see you guys tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, US, 6 p.m. British Standard Time in the UK for adding value to your photography. And then, of course, we'll be back here next week for the Last Frame Live. Until then, gang, you know the drill. Go pick up a camera and shoot something because your best shot, it's your next shot. Adios. Take care.